Okay, that's a great question. So the reason why that's the case is because for most people, language is held on in the left hemisphere. So I actually have a brain model here to show you. But basically, language production is usually associated with Broca's area or Broca's area, and that's usually found kind of in the around the frontal lobe area here. And so for individuals that have a stroke in that part of their brain, what you'll often see is an issue with producing language. They can still understand language, so they can understand kind of people that are talking to them, but they'd have a hard time kind of producing language as a result of having the stroke there. Yeah, so oftentimes that's assessed by a psychologist. They're referred to as neuropsychologists. And neuropsychologists are really interesting because the way that they assess cognitive function is through a variety of cognitive testing. And so neuropsychologists would study intelligence, they'd study language, they'd study executive function, decision making, and they do that by a variety of kind of cognitive tests. And so neuropsychologist is usually the individual or the healthcare provider that would assess cognitive dysfunction. Oh, yes, definitely. So it depends on where the stroke occurs in the actual brain. But if we were to take this brain and kind of look inside, so just underneath around here, so we have to remove all this fun stuff, but right underneath, you would find what's called the fusiform face area. And for people that have strokes in that brain region, they have something called prosopagnosia. So they can't recognize faces. So just imagine if, you could only recognize your partner by the perfume or the cologne that they wear, or you recognize them by the fact that they're really tall or by something else, but you wouldn't be able to recognize their face. So you could literally be walking on the street and, your partner could be passing by you. And if all you could see was their face, you wouldn't recognize them. So I think that's probably one of the coolest. Well, it's a terrible symptom, but kind of one of the most interesting. Another interesting symptom is hemispatial neglect. So for people that have strokes, oftentimes in the parietal lobe, so kind of that top region here, what will happen is that they may actually ignore half of their world. So if you got them to if you told them kind of draw a picture of the world that you can see kind of in front of you, of your visual field, they'd only draw half of their visual field. And that's because part of their brain has a hard time kind of integrating the other half. And so there's been plenty of experiments that have kind of tested this. One way of testing it is with a clock task. So you'd get an individual to draw a clock. And what they would do is that they put all the numbers just on one side. So they wouldn't kind of finish the rest of the clock. They'd put, all the numbers squished onto one of the sides because they're ignoring the other side of their world. Oh yeah, that's a really great question. So certainly, you have changes in your lifestyle, mobility, all of those things. But what we're starting to learn about psychiatric illnesses is that there's also some kind of inflammation that happens in the brain, particularly with depression. So there's been research that has shown that if you look at the brains of people who were depressed when they died, that you see kind of inflammatory markers. And what we know is that strokes produce a kind of state of inflammation in the brain. And so it might actually be a neurobiological phenomenon where the stroke produces the inflammation, and then the inflammation is correlated with depressed mood and kind of the symptoms of depression.